Hey YouTube, welcome to the Fantasy Football Today Thursday Night Football post game Q&A recap, whatever you want to call it. I'm Chris Towers, and I'm just trying to recover from one of the worst football games I think I've ever seen. It was actually really entertaining listening to Al Michaels' commentary because he was just livid. I think that he had to watch this game. It was pretty entertaining. It's looking through the comments here. It seems like seems like you guys had a pretty similar reaction. Let's just go through the stats here. The Broncos and Colts played an overtime game where the Colts won 12-9. They had 37 first downs between them, 19 for the Colts, 18 for the Broncos, 375 yards of total offense on 71 plays for a robust 5.3 yards per play for the Denver Broncos. And that's misleading because you had a 37-yard catch by Jerry Jeudy late in that game. You had a 51 catch by Courtland Sutton where I don't know who Russell Wilson was throwing to on that ball. It was Courtland Sutton took it out of Montreal Washington's hands. A referee got run over during the process of that play being made. It was just incredibly sloppy, which was fitting for this game. Melvin Gordon, I thought looked okay. He got the workload that you were hoping for, 15 carries, 3 targets. Mike Boone, 7 carries, 3 targets. Mike Boone looked faster at the very least, but, I think it's safe to say that this is Melvin Gordon's backfield, but the margin for error is probably pretty slim. Another fumble would probably cost him some playing time. So don't feel great about a split backfield in a bad offense. On the Colts side, Nyheim Hines obviously left with that concussion. Scary stuff there as he struggled to stumble off the field. Deion Jackson and Phillip Lindsay, they ran okay. They combined for 102 yards on 24 carries. I don't think either of them is really worth adding looking ahead to week 6, unless, Jonathan Taylor looks like he's going to be out. So, nothing much there. We'll keep an eye on Jonathan Taylor's status. And I thought Alec Pierce looked really good. I think he's a really talented player. It's just Matt Ryan looks washed up. I don't know if Matt Ryan needs gloves on both hands. He's having a lot of trouble holding on to the ball. He's getting hit as he throws a lot. It's not good situations there. He looks really washed up. Russell Wilson looks pretty bad for the Seahawks as well. I don't know if you can really have much confidence in either of these situations. Certainly, I can't point to anything for fantasy players to be, optimistic about. So pretty bad stuff. Yeah, Matt Ryan did have terrible protection too, but it's also there were several situations where the pocket collapsed a little bit, and his lack of mobility was really crushing issues. So that's I just both of these offenses look really bad. Well, let's get to some questions. I don't really think we need to spend much time on that actual game because, man, you'd prefer not to have to start anyone from either of those offenses except for Courtland Sutton, maybe. Let's see. Make sure you send your questions in the chat, and I'm going to look. When you only have 4 plays per possession, you can really skew the stats. Yeah, going out, 3 and out every time doesn't really help. Jamal Williams or James Robinson. So I know James Robinson is the start of the week for this week, and I think that makes sense because this is a game against the Texans where it looks like the Jaguars should be able to control the clock and run the ball, and they won't have to chase points. And that was what happened in week 4 is they were trailing, and we did see James Robinson's role take a hit. And that's a little concerning in the long term because it means that, he's going to be game script dependent. We don't think this Jaguars team is great. They might be pretty competitive. It certainly looks like it. But, if Travis Etienne's going to see bigger roles in games where they're trailing, it makes it harder to trust James Robinson. So, yeah, I think in the long run, James Robinson, his value looks a little iffy. This week, I do like him. He's an RB2 for me and a solid RB2, but I do have Jamal Williams ahead. That Lions offense they're mauling people in the running game right now. They've been really good. So I think Jamal Williams just he's a safe bet for a big role, and I like what we've seen from him so far. Let's see. Pierce got more targets than ETN or Pittman. Yeah, look, some of those were late in the game when the Colts were, trying to move the ball to get down the field to tie the game or to take a lead late. They were bad throws. I don't know how much you can take away from that. I think Pierce looked good, but yeah, it's pretty bad. 10-team half PPR flex, one Jeff Wilson or Deontay Johnson. So it's worth noting Deontay Johnson was added to the injury report on Thursday. I'm not sure exactly what happened. It was a hip injury. He was added to the injury report Thursday. That's always a concern. The midweek additions to the injury report are always a concern just because it runs the risk of, it was an injury that he suffered during practice on Thursday. That's always what you're concerned about because it just gives you fewer opportunities or less time to heal. So, obviously it depends on what we see on Friday, whether Johnson looks like he's going to be limited or not. If he's healthy, I would play him over Jeff Wilson. I like Jeff Wilson, but I'm still really optimistic about Deontay Johnson. I think if anything, Kenny Pickett represents a possible chance at upside for this Steelers offense. It's not a guarantee. We've gotten burned with the Steelers, doing it can't get worse. Well, Mitchell Trubisky was worse than Ben Roethlisberger, I think. So, I don't want to say Kenny Pickett can't be worse than Mitchell Trubisky. It's unlikely he'll be worse, but he certainly can be. So I'm hopeful that Kenny Pickett helps this offense take a step forward, and I think that would be good for Deontay Johnson, who just is always open and gets a bunch of targets no matter who the quarterback is. So I don't think that's going to be an issue with Kenny Pickett. But yeah, that's more long-term in this one. You're hoping the Steelers have to throw the ball a lot. That typically benefits Deontay Johnson. If he's healthy, I think he's going to have a good game. Is Michael Pittman still a wide receiver too? Yeah, I think so. I had him ranked as a wide receiver 1 this week, and obviously, that didn't work out all that well. 5 catches for 59 yards. It's not a bad game. The concern, I guess, would be, is Michael Pittman more of a high floor, low ceiling kind of player? We had the one big game from him this season, week 1, where he, it was like 120 yards and a touchdown, 121 yards, 9 catches. That was a game where the Colts played like 90 snaps and threw the ball a ton. And so, in that situation where you're talking about that much playing time, 9 catches for 121 yards and a touchdown, that's a very good game, but it's not, like a massive, massive game. We've seen other guys have bigger games. Jamar Chase in week 1 was a similar example of a similar situation. So, I think Pittman's probably more like a wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 1. He's probably more like 15 than 10, but that still should be a very good guy to have around. No way Hackett lasts Russ's contract. Russ might not last Russ's contract at this point. I think they can get out in 2026. God, are we already there yet? Kareem Hunt or Garrett Wilson, half PPR. I would go with Kareem Hunt. I think the situation with the Jets, I talked about this in FFT and 5 if you were watching that short stream, but I think the situation with the Jets is that you want to hold the wide receivers, but probably not start them if you can avoid it. Garrett Wilson is more like a wide receiver 3 and more on the lower end of that. I have kind of him, Elijah Moore, and Corey Davis all projected for like 7 targets in around that range, plus or minus 1. I think they all had at least 4 and no more than 6 in Zach Wilson's first game. So it's not clear exactly what the split is going to be, or, whether Zach Wilson's even good enough to support multiple wide receivers. So it's a situation where I don't necessarily want to trust Garrett Wilson, even though I think he's a very good player. Stevenson or Dillon. So this is one where I've been going back and forth on the Patriots offense. They have like the 12th highest over under or implied total of the week. I think it's 25.5 points is their implied total. I know the Lions defense is very bad, and I know their offense is very good, and that tends to lead to high scoring games. And that has certainly been the case so far. I just have a lot of trouble getting excited about a Patriots offense with either a hobbled Mac Jones or a, healthy Bailey Zappi. So I'm not as excited about Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris as the rest of my coworkers, but I do have them both as top 24 running backs now. But I've got AJ Dillon just a little bit ahead. He's number 19 for me. So I would go with him ahead of Stevenson, but I understand if you want to go with Stevenson. Trade Jonathan Taylor for Derrick Henry and Chris Godwin. I think that's fine. Jonathan Taylor, I still think is a top 3 running back rest of the season. Derrick Henry is more like top 10, but Godwin should be close to a wide receiver 1 the rest of the way, especially in PPR. So I'm fine making that move because I think the downgrade from Jonathan Taylor to Derrick Henry is worth it. And honestly, it may not actually be that much of a downgrade if, this Colts offense continues to struggle like it has, because one of the things that the Colts were hoping for with Matt Ryan taking over was, look, this offense isn't going to be explosive. This is never going to be like the Rams at the peak of their offensive heyday. This was always going to be an offense that controlled the clock, limited the opposing team's possessions by not turning the ball over, and that has not been the case for Matt Ryan. He's got 10 fumbles through the first 5 games of the season. I think 6 interceptions, 7 interceptions maybe. It's been dreadful. So yeah, I think it's possible that Derrick Henry's as good as Jonathan Taylor the rest of the way. Especially if you can put Derrick Henry in your lineup this week. I don't know how your roster rules work, but if you can get an extra game out of Derrick Henry that you can out of Jonathan Taylor, that even tips it in his favor a little more. Gabe Davis or Curtis Samuel in half PPR. I'm going with Curtis Samuel, assuming the illness that he's missed practice with this week is not enough to keep him out on Sunday. No Jahan Dotson should lead to more concentrated targets for Washington. Curtis Samuel has been their number 1 target, I think 3 out of 4 games, if not every game. So yeah, he doesn't have, he's not getting a ton of downfield targets, but the volume is there. The role in the running game has been pretty okay so far. So they like to get the ball in his hands. I think that's going to continue. I would start him over Gabe Davis, who really needs to show something. He's got one of, if not the lowest targets per route run rate in all of football right now. You can say it's the ankle injury. He's finally fully practicing this week after being limited the last couple of weeks, but he's also playing every snap. So it's hard to know how much of that is the injury, but he has not been good. T. Higgins plus DK Metcalf for Jamar Chase and Gabe Davis. I would rather have I think I would rather have the Jamar Chase side, but it's close. I don't know if I trust Geno Smith is playing over his head. I think it's fair to say, how much of the regression there's going to be remains to be seen, but I think he will be worse than he has been, and that's going to hurt DK Metcalf. And I still think Jamar Chase is better than T. Higgins, but I do think DK Metcalf will be better than Gabe Davis. So that one is pretty close. Pittman's slow as molasses. Maybe he's just not healthy, but I don't think that's ever been the thing with Michael Pittman. Wasn't he like a 4.4 guy at the combine? I remember him running pretty fast. 4.52. Yeah, that's okay. He's on the bigger side, so that's pretty good. But yeah, I don't think it's a Michael Pittman issue, is what I'll say. Monty's still going to be out, or Herbert this week again for the Bears. I think the worst case scenario is what we might be seeing, which is that David Montgomery practiced on a limited basis on Thursday. And if he's healthy, I think you're looking at a situation where he probably isn't 100% healthy and probably doesn't get his normal work, but is going to be involved enough that it's a headache. And I think, Khalil Herbert has earned a bigger role, is what I'm assuming, for the Bears offense. We know they want to run the ball, so I don't think there's a problem with 2 running backs being involved. But if it's a situation where Montgomery plays but isn't 100%, then it's like, who gets which role, who gets which carries, how much, are the Bears going to be able to run the ball? Is this a situation where, even if they get blown out, they're going to run the ball? That's kind of been the thing with them. They had the game against the Packers where they threw 14 passes, even though they were down by 2 scores at halftime. So they're going to run the ball a ton. I think that's clear. But I would tend to think you want to stay away from the Bears backfield if David Montgomery's active this week, is what I would say. Let's get those questions in. Let's hit the like button. Let's subscribe to the Fantasy Football Today YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Fantasy Football Today newsletter. There's supposed to be here. We'll put the little QR code right above my shoulder. You can just highlight that and go subscribe to the Fantasy Football newsletter. That's what I'm going to do after this. I'm going to go finish my laundry, and then finish the Fantasy Football Today newsletter because you got to have your priorities straight, and my wife wants to go to sleep before the laundry's done. So let's see. That was one of the worst games I've ever seen. Yeah. I mean, it was awful. Is Fields droppable in Dynasty? Not in Dynasty. I think in a regular league, it's okay to drop Justin Fields. I think he's still super talented. I think the skill set is very enticing for fantasy, but the Bears haven't even come close to looking like a modern NFL offense yet. They've barely shown a willingness to trust him to move the ball, not even downfield. I mean, they took a couple of shots last week, but it's just like to do anything really. And he's getting sacked at a crazy rate. I don't think it's just the offensive line's fault. Justin Fields has not proven that he can be the kind of quarterback that the Bears need him to be. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to drop him in a redraft league, but not in Dynasty. There's still too much long-term upside. Let's see, Khalil Herbert or James Robinson. I would go with James Robinson if David Montgomery plays. If Montgomery's out, I do have Herbert ranked a little higher. Hit the like button for the late breakdown. Yes, this guy right there. Thank you, Atunga Anasi. Jedi Mind Tricks. Wilson will be dropped in 100% of leagues. Russell Wilson, Garrett Wilson, Zach Wilson. I think Zach Wilson is probably not worth rostering in most leagues, but I think the other two guys will still be worth rostering. Gabe Davis going to have a huge bounce back. It's possible. I mean, this is like the kind of player he is that I think what we've seen so far is not going to be out of the norm. I think we're going to see some really big games. I think we're going to see some pretty quiet games. I think like you're hoping, at least I am, I'm hoping that he's Mike Williams. I'm hoping that he can be an 1,100 plus yard guy with a bunch of touchdowns who frustrates the heck out of you all season long, because there's going to be games where he hits the big play, he hits the downfield targets, and he looks amazing. And there's going to be plays where, he gets 5 targets and 2 of them are just out of his reach and one of them gets batted and he just doesn't, perform that way, because that's what life is like for downfield guys. Think back to Deshaun Jackson's heyday when he was putting up 1,000 yards, 1,100 yards every year, but there was always, he's inconsistent. Think of Tyler Lockett. Think of DK Metcalf. These guys who are really, really good players, but they're downfield oriented, which makes it a little tougher to trust them. How am I feeling on Rachaad White versus Brian Robinson, full PPR rest of season? So I think it comes down to this. Brian Robinson is more likely to be a low-end starter, but Rachaad White has a much clearer path to being a high-end starter. I think it's very, very unlikely at any point this season we're talking about Brian Robinson as a legitimate top 12 running back. I think there's a chance of that with Rachaad White. So it's like, you think about the probabilities, and it's like maybe there's a 50% chance that Brian Robinson is a, Damian Harris-like player. Someone that you're hoping gets into the end zone and rushes for 80 yards. There's probably a 2% chance that Brian Robinson is a top 12 running back. Maybe there's a 10% chance Rachaad White is. If Leonard Fournette gets hurt, I think Rachaad White's going to be a very, very good fantasy option. So it just kind of depends on what you need. But the way I tend to think about my rosters and tend to build my rosters, I would rather have Rachaad White and take the upside play. Am I crazy for thinking Chris Godwin can be a top 12 receiver the rest of the season? Should I be concerned with the Bucs pass volume? No. I think the fact that the Bucs wide receivers were all healthy last week, or at least healthy enough to play, and the Buccaneers completely abandoned the run game and looked, like as much of a pass heavy team as they ever did last season. I think that's a good sign. I think this is what that offense wants to be, and I don't think they want to throw Leonard Fournette into the line 20 times a game. They want to get Tom Brady back in shotgun, slinging the ball around. And that's what it's going to be like. So I think Chris Godwin absolutely has top 12 upside. Whether he gets there is a different question, because I do think the risk of re-injury is the primary concern, but also just that, maybe he's just not 100% all season. Maybe he's just not as explosive, and he's more like, I could see him being like what Cole Beasley has been the last few seasons in Buffalo, in kind of a worst case scenario where he stays healthy and he's like the 23rd best wide receiver the rest of the way, which there's nothing wrong with that, especially where you were able to draft him in most drafts. But yeah, top 12 upside is absolutely on the table. Watching that game made me feel less depressed about the state of my Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, that's fair. Trade Russell Wilson for a half full bag of peanuts. I mean, if you can get a half full bag at this point, that would be pretty remarkable. Look, I just saw your avatar. That's that's funny. I cannot say for sure that Russell Wilson is completely washed up. It's switching teams for the first time in a 14-year career, however long he's been around, and playing with a first-time head coach who probably isn't up to snuff, and maybe Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy just aren't as good as we think they are, and Albert Okwuegbunam and those running backs, maybe it's just not the situation we thought it was. But I think that there's room for improvement. I think there's a chance that he figures this out. But yeah, it's been frustrating, and this is a situation. It's like DJ Moore last week, where I can't point to anything specific and say this is why DJ Moore is going to be better. It's just he's got to be, right? And that's how I feel about Russell Wilson. Is I don't think he's just completely lost it. He was not great last season, but he was better than this. So I think I think he'll be better. But if you wanted to drop Russell Wilson for Jared Goff or Trevor Lawrence, if those guys are available, I absolutely couldn't tell you not to. CeeDee Lamb didn't practice today with a groin injury, but I assume he's going to play. He was talking to the media, and it did not sound like it was serious. So I would expect CeeDee Lamb to play. And yeah, he's a top 20 wide receiver, in the 20-ish range, but I'm expecting, him to continue to produce. Let's see. Should I drop Dalton Schultz? No, I hopefully, it might be a situation where you can't really trust him for this week or next week. He's coming back from the knee injury. He did, run his normal route share and played his normal snaps in week 4. So it's possible that he just needs Dak Prescott to be healthy to be worth starting. But I do think when Dak's back, Dalton Schultz should be good. Glad I had the Denver D to counterbalance Pittman being underwhelming. I mean, look, I guess that's one way to think about it is you play the good defense against the terrible offense while also starting someone from the terrible offense. But yeah, it's I don't know, man. This Colts offense might just be terrible. Losing Ryan Kelly, they're down a couple offensive linemen now. Matt Ryan can't hold on to the ball. He has no escapability whatsoever. Very little velocity on his throws. It's really bad. Romeo Doubs or Josh Reynolds. So Josh Reynolds did practice on Thursday. He was limited with an ankle injury. However, DJ Chark also practiced. So if Chark is healthy, I would start him over Reynolds. I would start Romeo Doubs over Reynolds as well. Let's see. Am I doing right by benching Deontay Johnson, Gabe Davis, and Kyle Pitts for Tyler Lockett, Jeff Wilson, and Gerald Everett? Let's go through it one by one. So I'm going to take Johnson versus Lockett. I have Johnson ranked higher than Lockett, but it's close-ish. There's about 10 spots in the rankings between them, but it's a point in the rankings where the differences are pretty slim. Like I'm looking at my projections. I have Deontay Johnson projected for right around 14 points. I have Tyler Lockett projected for about 13 and a half. So it's not a strong opinion between the two of them. So I think it's fine. I would rather have Johnson. Benching Gabe Davis for Jeff Wilson, I think is perfectly reasonable. Davis might have more upside, but Jeff Wilson is a good fit in that offense. It's a good offense to be in. And Kyle Pitts versus Gerald Everett. Look, I've got Pitts one spot ahead of Gerald Everett. So I cannot in good faith tell you. What I will say is I would not start Gerald Everett over Kyle Pitts, but I cannot tell you shouldn't, because that is mostly just my faith in Kyle Pitts being an elite player. However, it's possible that this decision will be made for you. Kyle Pitts has not practiced this week due to a hamstring injury. So you almost, I don't want to say that, but you almost prefer that Kyle Pitts not play this week and not have to make the decision. And, the fact that Kyle Pitts is dealing with this injury does make you feel a little better about his limited role in week 4. I was kind of panicking. He only ran 13 routes on 21 dropbacks in this game. I was thinking, like, what is going on? How does this make any sense? How is Parker Hesh, I think is how you pronounce his name, a former defensive end and linebacker in college who converted to tight end once he got to the NFL. How is this guy playing 10 routes when Kyle Pitts is only getting 13? Well, turns out Kyle Pitts probably wasn't healthy. He played less than half the snaps in the fourth quarter and in the second half overall. So I think that explains it. Is Russ a buy super low candidate or is he straight droppable? Yeah, I think it's fine to try to buy low on him. Like I said earlier, I think there's a chance he figures it out. I think there's a chance that this offense figures it out, but I can't give you a solid reason why. You watch the game, it looks terrible. So, yeah, if you're the type of person who wants to roster a second quarterback, you think you need upside at a second quarterback, yeah, I think it's fine to grab Russell Wilson for super cheap. I don't agree he looked washed in Seattle, however. The second half wasn't great, but he was coming. He rushed back from that finger injury. I think that hurt him. But he was so much better than this. The thing is, yes, Russell Wilson, there are things about him that have been frustrating for years. And Seahawks fans have always pointed this out. Anytime you say anything nice about Russell Wilson, the Seahawks fans will jump down your throat and tell you that Russell Wilson actually is terrible. And he's never been terrible. Even last season, he wasn't terrible. Even coming back from the injury, he wasn't terrible. He wasn't great. He wasn't himself. He wasn't the guy who's been one of the most efficient quarterbacks that we've ever seen. But he's always had limitations. He struggles seeing over the line. He doesn't throw across the middle of the field. He doesn't throw short. All those things. He takes too many sacks because he's always trying to make big plays. And his skill set has taken a step back. Clearly, he's not as mobile as he once was. So his ability to escape the pocket, make plays with his feet, not what it once was. But I don't agree that he looked washed last season. I think that's an overreaction. Can I get sweet Chris Towers analysis of Breece Hall versus Dameon Pierce this week? So I'm really interested to watch Dameon Pierce's usage this week because he did have a season high route rate. I think it was right around 50%. Breece Hall was at 63% in terms of his route share. So that's one where you give Breece Hall the edge. And Dameon Pierce did have the 6 targets last week. He turned them into 6 catches for 8 yards. So how much of that was a specific game script thing? How much of that was just the way that the defense was playing them? Are they planning on making him a focal point in the passing game? That's the question that we need to answer. And it's a question that we can't really answer right now. There was the one drive where Rex Burkhead, I think they were in hurry up. It was an obvious passing situations. And Rex Burkhead got the touchdown in the passing game last week. So I think, the way Breece Hall was used last week, I think his snap share was 65%, route participation was 63%. And he was every, early downs, he was right around 60%, passing downs, he was right around 60%, short yardage, all that, all this stuff. Breece Hall was pretty much used as an RB1. So I'm pretty optimistic about that usage. And he is one spot ahead of Dameon Pierce in my rankings this week. So that is, can't exactly say that I feel super confident in Breece Hall over Dameon Pierce, especially with, Breece Hall is dealing with a knee injury in practice. That's a little bit concerning. But I would go with Breece Hall. Let's get this bad boy up to 50 likes. Heck, let's get 1,000 likes. That's probably unlikely. There's 282 people watching right now. But if every single one of you hits we could get to 282 is how the math works out on that. If Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't play, would you play Josh Reynolds over Deontay Johnson, I would assume? No, I would not play Josh Reynolds over Deontay Johnson. Maybe if DJ Chark is also out, but Chark and Reynolds were both limited in practice on Thursday. So I would think there's as good of a chance that Chark plays, and I would start him over Reynolds, but I would start Deontay over both. Is Melvin Gordon a sell/sell high? The better question is, what is anybody giving you for Melvin Gordon? Is anybody viewing him as a top 12 running back right now or top 15 running back? Is anybody viewing him as a top 24 running back? I think we all watched that game. And I think a lot of people are going to have the same thought, which is Mike Boone looked better, which I don't think is necessarily true. Mike Boone definitely looked faster. But those two things often get conflated, and it doesn't necessarily matter if we think Mike Boone looked better. The Broncos coaching staff needs to think that as well, and I don't know if they do. It was interesting to see that Mike Boone was in the game in the fourth quarter when they were trying to run the ball down and, run out the clock. And then overtime, they need to move the ball. They're down. Melvin Gordon's back in the game and making plays. So I think Melvin Gordon's still the number one there, and I'm viewing him as a top 20 running back moving forward. So if you can get that kind of value for him, if I could go out and sell him for Deontay Johnson, someone we mentioned a lot, or it's hard to come up with Juju Smith-Schuster, Devontae Smith, those kind of guys, I'd be okay with that, but it's not an obvious one for me. So I think you probably want to hold. Corey Davis or Tony Pollard in the flex? I would go with Corey Davis in the flex, especially in a PPR. Pollard hasn't really gotten the passing game usage that we would hope for. Let's see some more questions. I'll do another, let's say 10 minutes of questions. Keep the rest of season. David Montgomery, Jeff Wilson, Melvin Gordon, Cam Akers, Rashad Penny, Brian Robinson. Okay, so let's rank them rest of the season. I would go Montgomery, Wilson, Gordon, Penny, Akers, and Brian Robinson. So, if you have to drop one, I guess Brian Robinson would be the guy, although I think it's pretty likely he gets picked up. If that happens, I think it's likely any of these guys get picked up, but Akers, you might be able to, it might be worth, Saturday night, if you need a roster spot, drop Cam Akers and see if you can sneak him back through on your roster next week. But, he doesn't look very good right now. And it's entirely possible that they just make the switch to Darrell Henderson. So, Joe Mixon plus Terry McLaurin for Stephon Diggs. What's Diggs' honest trade value? Waddle plus Dillon for Diggs. I would say Waddle plus Dillon for Diggs if you could get that. If you could get Stephon Diggs giving up Jalen Waddle and A.J. Dillon, I think that's a huge win. Stephon Diggs is a top 10 or top 5 wide receiver for me. Mixon versus plus McLaurin is really interesting because McLaurin, I think, is just going to frustrate you all season. I think what we've seen so far is what we're going to continue to see. I saw a stat that he has either the most or the second most rate of or percentage of his yardage coming with his team having less than a 10% chance of winning in terms of win probability, which is fascinating. They're throwing the ball a ton. They've been in a lot of situations where they've had to throw the ball, but Terry McLaurin, his target share is pretty low for a guy with his skill set. It is 15%. They're spreading the ball around a ton. Logan Thomas has an 11% share. Jahan Dotson's at 12%. The running backs are at 22% combined. So yeah, it's a frustrating situation, but Mixon's running or passing game role is better than it's ever been. It's what we thought he was going to have last year, and it's a product, I think, of the way that defenses are playing against this Bengals offense. They're playing this too high safety coverage, and they're basically making the Bengals take 10 plays to get down the field and score. And the whole point of that is your margin for error goes a lot thinner when you can't hit the big plays consistently. Joe Burrow had 12 passes of at least 50 yards last season. It was the most in the NFL. I think it was the most in the NFL in the last 5 years at least. And that hasn't been there. He's had 2 through 4 games. So, obviously we'll see this weekend because Joe Burrow did have 5 50-yard plays against the Ravens in 2 games last season. It was unbelievable the way he played against that team. But, that's something to keep in mind, because if the Bengals can force teams to stop playing this too high coverage, they'll be able to get the ball down the field more. They'll have to dump the ball off less to Joe Mixon, and that's going to hurt his role. So it's a give and take, obviously. But to get back to the question, Mixon plus McLaurin for Diggs, I think that's really close. I think I would rather have Diggs, though. What can I get for Pittman? Prefer tight end or running back? Yeah, it's the wrong time to try to sell Michael Pittman is the problem. I get that you're frustrated. I get that you want to get out of him. Maybe you think like it's a house of cards and you want to get out before the last card falls. I don't think that's the case with Michael Pittman. I think generally speaking, this offense can only get better, or at least it can't get worse. Famous last words, obviously. But um, if I was going to try to trade him, you might hate me for saying this, but I would try to get Kyle Pitts. I would try to get Kyle Pitts plus because Pittman and Pitts were being drafted in similar ranges in the preseason, and Pittman has been better. So I think you could try to sell Pittman for Pitts plus, something else. What that something else is, maybe a Rashad Penny type, maybe an Antonio Gibson, Darrell Henderson, someone at running back who's got some upside, but isn't necessarily going to cost you an arm or a limb. Sell mid on Sutton. This offense is so bad. But again, it's like Pittman, where I think it's the wrong time to try to sell. I get that it's a bad offense, but Sutton's been productive. Today was a little fluky with that 51-yard catch that he took out of his teammates' hands, but I still think selling Sutton right now is probably the wrong move. Probably should have done it before this week when everybody watched them on Thursday night. Terry McLaurin or Amari Cooper? I'm going with Amari Cooper. I think they're both going to be frustrating like wide receiver threes, but I think Cooper, his target share might be double what Terry McLaurin's is. Let me check that because I think Cooper is above 30%. If not, he's right around it. He's at 27%. So almost double Terry McLaurin's target share. We'll do a couple more questions before we go. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for hanging out and staying up late. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Like Jedi Mind Trick said, already hit the like button. Y'all got to do the same. I agree. What to do with Russ, Geno, or Lawrence? Better rest of season. So I would bet on Russell Wilson being better at the rest of the season than Geno Smith, certainly, and probably Trevor Lawrence. We saw Trevor Lawrence go up against an Eagles defense that pressures the quarterback really well, and he fell apart. Four lost fumbles and an interception. It was a really bad game for him. So he's still not quite to the point where you can trust him every week. This week will be a good test because it's a bounce back game against a bad Houston defense. We'll see what that looks like, but I think it's fine if you are relying on Trevor Lawrence the rest of the season. I think I would rank him like 15th overall at quarterback, but yeah. Let's see. Trade away Jonathan Taylor for Mixon. The only reason I would think that this might be okay is if you could do it all like for week 4 or week 5. We're in week 5, right? Yeah, week 5. That way you get an extra game out of Joe Mixon. Otherwise, if you're just talking, week 6 and on, I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be better, assuming that he's healthy. One weakness on my team, and it is Kyle Pitts. Please tell me you have some positive feedback for me. The positive feedback would be Kyle Pitts literally turned 22 to yesterday. Technically yesterday. Ab and I were talking about this on a recent stream that we did where it's not tomorrow until you go to sleep. So technically it's still Kyle Pitts' birthday for me because I haven't gone to sleep, but we'll say it was Thursday. He's a 22-year-old who just had 1,000 yards as a tight end. He did that as a 21-year-old, 20-year-old for the first quarter of the season. He still has one of the highest air yard shares in the NFL. The Falcons aren't throwing the ball, but they've been in weird games where they've been able to not throw the ball. We'll see this week against Tampa Bay. They're going to have to throw the ball more than they did last week. I guarantee that. They're going to throw more than 21 passes. I would guess they're going to throw more than 30 passes. And Kyle Pitts is still getting, 24% of the targets, and he's still getting a bunch of downfield looks, and he's still an elite player, an elite talent. And so I don't think Kyle Pitts was overhyped as a talent. I think he's, that good of a player. I think he's an elite player who's just been in a bad situation and really has come close to a couple of big plays so far this season that I think we would look a lot differently at him. I think one of them was I think he drew a defensive pass interference a couple of weeks ago. So yes, we're making excuses for Kyle Pitts, but that's what you should be doing for an elite player who's 22 years old and who has more upside than anyone you could possibly start in his place. That's the thing with Oh, I'd rather have Gerald Everett. I'll just drop Kyle Pitts. I'm playing any tight end here like this. I'm playing any tight end over Kyle Pitts. Okay. Like, I don't know. Like, sure, Tyler Higbee's getting a bunch of targets right now, and he's turning like 12 targets a game into 60 yards. Like, yes, he's been producing more than Kyle Pitts, but Kyle Pitts is unquestionably the better player. And if the Falcons are going to throw the ball 20 times a game the rest of the season, yeah, Kyle Pitts is going to stink. There's no question about it. They're not going to throw the ball 20 times a game. They're going to throw the ball probably 30 times a game. And that's still going to be really low relative to the rest of the league. But that still might mean 8 targets for Kyle Pitts. And he's going to catch 5 of those passes. And he's going to turn them in. Like, it's just bet on elite players. Look at CeeDee Lamb with Cooper Rush as his quarterback. He's still been really good. The Cowboys offense is better than the Falcons offense. And the Cowboys offense is more conducive to fantasy than the Falcons offense because they throw the ball more. But it's just to say that if you gave up on CeeDee Lamb when Cooper Rush went down, you've missed out on really solid production so far. You should bet on elite players outperforming their situations. And the situation is going to be better than it has been so far. So I'm not giving up on Kyle Pitts. Call me a dummy, whatever. I will go down with the ship. That's the kind of player I am. Just traded Gerald Everett for Pat Freiermuth so I can bench Pitts. I think Pat Freiermuth and Gerald Everett are both fine tight ends, and I'd rather have Kyle Pitts rest of the season. But sure, if you want to start them this week over him, that's fine too. We'll do one non-Kyle Pitts. Am I concerned with Eckler's snap share or workload? Not even a little bit. There have not been a lot of goal line opportunities for the Chargers this season, and he hasn't gotten all of them this season. There was Xander Horvath? Is that the fullback's name who got a touchdown? I think Sonny Michel got a goal line snap or goal line carry as well. That's been frustrating. But if you look at like all the snaps inside of the 10-yard line, all the snaps inside the red zone, all the snaps close to the goal line, it's been Austin Eckler playing about 65 to 70% of them, just like it was last season. So yes, he only scored the 3 touchdowns last week from 10 yards and out. That's just because he scored those touchdowns from 10 yards and out. If they had gotten closer, he probably would have gotten opportunities to score them. I'm not going to hold it against him that he's a good player. Austin Eckler still getting the passing downs, still getting the high-value targets. I have no concerns about Austin Eckler. He's still a top 5 running back for me and top probably 5 running back, top 10 player, maybe top 8 player overall. So, yeah, I'm not giving up on Austin Eckler. I don't want to say giving up, but I'm going to call this stream a wrap. It's 12:40. I got to go finish my laundry. I got to finish this newsletter. I got a lot of things going on. I got to edit this podcast. So thank you so much, guys, for hanging out after the game. We'll be back next Thursday with another post-Thursday night Q&A. Hopefully the game isn't quite as bad, although it is Commanders and Bears, so pretty high likelihood of a bad game. We'll talk to you then. We'll see you on Sunday morning for another stream. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Fantasy Football Today newsletter or YouTube channel and newsletter, Fantasy Football Today newsletter. And Closing Time is a great song. Yeah. I'll play the guitars at some point. Maybe later on. All right. See you guys. Bye.